Welcome. I am your host, Dr. Brenda, the founder of A Word for You Incorporated and Seeds of Wisdom in New Ground. Thank you for your support, and I appreciate being in partnership with you during these eschatological times, these end times, whatever you believe, the end times. We are seeing wars, not just rumors of wars. We are seeing impossible things that if we exist only in this dimension, then truly we are a people most miserable. But some of us have to keep showing up because today is always yesterday's tomorrow. Make sure that you're telling yourself and someone else, welcome to your future. And you sure are looking mighty good on this day where we only have 5 days if you counting down, and 36 if you counting up. And these include today. Until what? Until Resurrection Sunday, until Easter. But some of you will be glad to know that Lent actually officially ends tomorrow. So you don't even have to do Fish Fry Friday 2 days from now, depending upon how you count the time. And you can go back to whatever you gave up, unless you've been revived along the way. Then maybe you just want to not ever do what you've been not doing ever since March 5th, and where you have been experiencing God in a whole new plane, doing new magnificent things for you because he got you right the first time. Welcome to a 40-day virtual revival that I hope you are helping me to spread to the whole wide world as I continue to obey God on this leg of my assignment. I've had a lot of assignments that the Lord has trusted me with, including people as part of those assignments. And it is nothing but joy unspeakable and full of glory. And now that I learned that Finland is the happiest country, you better believe that I've been trying to figure out what's going on in Finland. And as soon as I can, I'm gonna try to go run at least a 3-day over there, overnight or something that I can do just to be in the atmosphere. Because there was a year that I was there and I didn't realize this was happening. So, you know, when you get around that Deutschland, it is different. And so it is peaceful. It's peaceful, but I wasn't specific in Finland and the Netherlands. I did spend a lot of time in Holland because I watched Heidi growing up and I wanted to know what those big wooden shoes felt like. And I was able to go and watch them be made. It's really amazing watching windmills to be made where people are utilizing instrumentation that is a lot less than that we use in the United States. I'm so excited because Jaira got you right, got me right the first time, ex nihilo, when he created male and female. So regardless of what happened with Byron when he put us in this body and had to send us here through iniquity, sin, but that's just what we suited and booted to deal with. As long as we manage this body, we can do what we're instructed in Romans 12. When Paul said, I beseech you, I compel you, I exhort you, I encourage you. I want to give you reason for strong consideration to present your body as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, because that's your reasonable service. Because if you got a clean soul and a clean spirit, how come you got a dirty body? Go wash up. Get some deodorant on. Do something so you don't stink. Present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God. That's just your reasonable service. And don't be conformed to this world, but rather be transformed, not by the renewing of your brain, but the renewing of your mind. You got to renew your mind to get your body under subjection so you can present it wholly. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, because it is then when we can prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So on this 40-day journey, we've been learning, you know what? You don't have to live in the permissive when you have access to the perfect. Some people got to live in the permissive will, but some of us can really prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God in the way that we present our bodies. Now, that is not a statement of condemnation for anyone. How you have to cap yourself so you can breathe, how you have to cover and protect and keep folks off your neck. So I never come to you from a platform of judgment, but rather one of just education, participation, and hopefully increase community, increase communion, so we can change this world 1 second at a time, one revival at a time, one word at a time, one message at a time, one transforming act at a time, with one piece of joy at a time, one stench of happiness at a time, one blessing at a time. We have hope, because when we look at hope, then we just get our little quill out. I just got the little quill. You all can see everything set up back there. Hopefully you can even see the palm back there that I have of the hand. And you can go back and even learn about that. That was learning for me. But when we have hope, then we keep our faith current. So I want you to check the currency of your faith, not only when it is, but how much it's worth. Because is your faith worth you fighting for? Do you have a fig's worth of faith so you can speak to this mountain, not to every mountain, just the one that you're looking at when you look in the mirror? That mountain. Have you gotten hungry enough, or are there so many selections, even though you have been faithful in your Lenten journey? Are you still able to glutton? Did you give up only chocolate cake, but you eating vanilla and carrot? There are so many things that we do when we conform to whatever our brain has learned in this world that will choke out the word. So I have hope in this dire, dire, dire time. I have hope, because if I can just keep a fig's worth of faith, then whatever mountain wants to destroy my hope, that mountain. Sometimes we bound because we trying to get rid of every single mountain. No, sometimes it's just the fig tree that is the mountain, because it look good. But then when you take her out on a date and you get in his car, it's all about leaves, and it gives you the heaves. So let me tell you, when we look at the entire horizon, we might be seeing 50, 11,000 different mountains. And then we're consumed by the weight of the world, that we are losing our hope, which is just our insight, our sight, to get us to the sequel. But we can't let all the evictions that occurred in our prequel to stop us from living in the quill. And I want you to know that you can hope until you get to your sequel, because as soon as your sequel arrives, it now falls back into the quill. And there's something else that you can hope for, because faith. Thank you for listening to me. Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. But how you going to hear that which you haven't heard? Well, you're going to hear because there's some John the Baptists out here right now, eschatological John the Baptists, that is doing some stomp down evangelical work right now, preaching the good news right now. And everybody ain't faking like they got figs. Some people preaching the kingdom down because they have a fervency and zeal according to knowledge. So use the zeal in your will, because we got stuff to do. It's Wednesday. I promised you a couple of things for today, so I want to make sure that I'm making good on my promise. But let me tell you, this Judas thing, it ain't got but like 3 bullets. So then when I'm just like, okay, Lord, we ready. It's Wednesday. Woo, 5 days. That's all to go. Woo, what day is this? Good God from glory. Day 36, that's a 9 and a 5. That's a 14. Today is the 16th, and a 1 and a 6 is a 7. So here we are again in triple perfection again. Then I fooled around and started studying this about Judas. Oh my Lord. I'm telling you, y'all that's out there running revivals, and you ain't taking no time to consecrate and meditate and make sure that you fast, praying, supplicating. Make sure you keeping your nutrition in, because you ain't fasting this whole 40 days. So let's just be real about that. Because if you are, you can get by maybe without eating food for 40 days, but you ain't got no fluid. You ain't even listening to me right now. So anyway, just don't be lying to yourself, because this is a for real. This is a real fig. This ain't no fictitious fig. This is a for real fig. Oh Lord, I'm gonna have to get a fig and try to bring it tomorrow. Now, what I need you to do with me, therefore I'm asking you, because it's up to you. Thank you for spending these seconds with me, but hey, I'm seeking strength to spend it with you. So your 5 grace things that you deserve to be doing for yourself, plus that other 6 one, which we know how to add those numbers up. Make sure that you are providing nutrition to yourself, and that's not an excuse to not consecrate yourself. You just make sure the Lord's not impressed with you out here dying, trying, dying. No, this is all about living. Make sure you're getting in proper nutrition, definitely proper hydration, and proper rest, and proper exercise, and time for just you and God. And then every 6 minutes of every 60 that you're alive, I want you to take 6 minutes and embrace love as a noun, because that's who you are, and then love on yourself, because that's what you do. We don't win because we know the rules of the game. We ain't got no time to be reading the rules of every kind of game out here that the devil trying to throw at us, and that the world is throwing at us. We can't read all these tax codes and worry about if our penny is really worth a penny, because we're going to find that out with Judas. But what we can do, we can be love, and we can love us. We can ask God to forgive us, and we can forgive us, so that we can forgive others, so that we can then, because I believe in it. I believe that we can. I am telling you, I don't care how long I might be in glory before you get there. But let me tell you what I do. I believe that there's enough good walking in the streets of this world, because I believe that there are enough transformed that I'm coming to help transform the transformers. And I believe that there are a remnant of the remnant that are living joyful, happy, embracing the word of peace they were given, in cheer while going through tribulation. I believe that Jesus Christ is our hope of glory. And I also believe that every time we hope for anything, as long as we have faith in the now, perpetually perfect, present tense, I believe that our best is yet to come. Not as I believe it every second of every day. All them 86,400. So I'm gonna keep it real, because that's just how we are. So by this time, by the time that we've been together now, I don't have no more shame in my game, and I learned how not to blame me. So I'm in a reviving season of release, and I invite you to do the same, because revision don't work. Listen, I already had to write stuff 3 and 4, 5 different times because I'm left-handed. I got any other left-handers out there? And anybody know what it's like to live in a right-handed world? We talking about the politics is going on in the religion. I just want to know if anybody has struggled left-handed in a right-handed world. Because you know, when you go into a restaurant, you got to wait for everybody to sit down. Oh, here, take a seat. Let me pull the chair out for you. And then you got to look to see, because you really don't want to tell everybody, you don't want to out yourself every time and just, oh, I'm left-handed, so I need to sit by somebody else who's left-handed, or either I need to be on the end. And if I could be on the far left end, so I'm not elbowing anyone, you know, all this etiquette stuff that we have to do because we've been called goats. But we didn't know that that meant greatest of all times. But let me tell you something. Even being left-handed in a right-handed world, I have been able to find righteousness through release. Because if you're left-handed for real, and you done tried to revise your story with your right hand, that scribble bibble, you can't even read it. I have people tell me, oh my goodness, you write so straight to be left-handed. Your penmanship is so nice. What, it's supposed to be wrangling? What did that mean? That's so patronizing, you know. So when we talk about all these other types of discrimination, being left-handed in the right-handed world is a whole new level of things that most people don't even give consideration to. But now, you get all kind of stuff left-handed. Did you know you can buy a left-handed iron and iron board? You can buy a left-handed calendar. You can buy a left-handed notebook so that you ain't running over your own elbow when you're writing. It's amazing. And we don't even recognize that the left lane is the fast lane. So y'all get out the way because we already know how to get ahead of you anyway. We know how to go around. And we really don't go slow in the left lane because we understand that the left lane is fast lane. So we ain't the ones causing these accidents that's going on with the people that's going 25 miles an hour in a 75-mile-an-hour speed zone. And don't fool around and get us on the Autobahn. Come on and welcome us in here, Germany. Let us get on that Autobahn because I've had opportunity to drive on that Autobahn. And let me tell you, this girl that didn't had her license since she was 16, because I got some L's that got some validity. But I learned to shut the front door and get the L out. And all them people that I've been let go out the back door, I ain't got to do it no more because I got master keys to the kingdom. And I don't only have kingdom keys. It's a master lock. Ooh. Fool around, I got that loser of my life and said, oh, I got some L's. And guess what? Left-handed people in the right-handed world, we can get the L out so we can put the left back in. Because whether you read from right to left or left to right, you ain't reading if you ain't got either one now. And you're so directionally off. I didn't even know you could get lost. I've told y'all before, I should be getting some, what's that stuff called? Royalties from Garmin. Never lost. I start renting cars for Hertz, and then they said, do you want never lost? And I'm like, I'm never lost. What are you talking about? And it's only costed I said, wait, can you go back to the lost part? Because I ain't never lost. I understand directions now. I ain't never lost. See, I got my L's when AAA wasn't AAA. I was part of the Chicago Motor Club. Sure was. In 1975. And I got all them credits too once they switched to AAA. But those trip ticks, I drove my mother all around the country. So, and when I wasn't the one driving, it didn't matter. You know, I'm 6 or 7. So by then, everybody telling me, oh, you gonna get your license. And you know, I was raised with my brothers. You got all these older brothers. And you got, if you can't do a curve at 100 miles an hour, then you gonna fail your test. Oh my goodness, the people do to threaten you into stuff. And I was open. I had to have hope because I sure didn't have no faith at that time. But I got the mails on my birthday when I turned 16. So then by then, I knew how to take a map. Do y'all know what a real map is that you hold in a book? You know how you be getting the great big ones, those big old maps, and finally they learned how to come out with highlighters like the same time with Post-its. And then you can highlight the route and you knew where to stop. And if you're a person of color, then you knew the green code. You had that book that told you where you better not stop. And you knew what I knew how to drive from Illinois to New York when I was 16 years old with my left-handed self. And I ain't never had my L's revoked. In fact, I didn't even have no speeding ticket until after I was in my 50s. And then it really was a dispute. It wasn't the truth. I wasn't speeding. And then when I went, because I thought I was going to take my little happy self and dispute and argue it with all my degrees and everything, with my license and with my pure record and everything. And I got right to court. It wasn't in the city that I live in, actually not even the state that I'm in. And I paid an attorney and did all this, and that attorney said yes, and da 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 da. And so I'm going in there and I'm just feeling good. And they just chit-chatting, judges talking to attorneys. Like, well, I ain't never seen nothing this little friendly. So I went on and I said, well, you know, here's my proof. And I haven't had any speedy tickets or anything. I went through my whole spiel. And just really nice. It was a female judge, and she said, thank you for coming in and taking your time. But yes, you're going to have to pay the ticket. And you know why? I said, I really don't. Especially after you said that I did a good job of pleading my case. And she said, because this is how we get revenue. So whether you were speeding or not, during these days on a calendar, then you should know that we increase our trafficking officers based on the deficit in the budget for our city that month. Hail Jesus, you're my king. Help me, Lord, help me, Lord. I need your help. By the time you took all my money, I paid that ticket. They just said, and if you pay it in full today, then we won't take no points off. I was so hot fire mad, but I tell you what I did do. I paid that thing, and I had to get rid of that. That was some fire in my bosom for a long time now, y'all. This is confession. So this is testimony before we get into this Judas thing, because I just want all of us to get rid of our judgment right now. Apolitical, non-religious, non-familial, whatever. This is just about, let's have a conversation. And let's just talk about some of this stuff that make you go, and how you need to just release all this stuff through being revived, because these revisions, let a left-hander tell you, being left-handed is more than when people say, oh, you write left-handed? No, I am left-handed. Being left-handed, you gonna reduce me being left-handed to just being somebody that writes left-handed? See, that was a whole thing. That was a big whole thing, because my mother was left-handed. And guess what? I'm gonna tell y'all something else that you better put down as a factoid, because when it come up, you might win a gift for knowing this. You know that I had the same fourth grade teacher that my mother had, and I'm number 6 or 7. Now, come on, y'all. I ain't got to tell you. I ain't gonna tell you what she looked like. I ain't gonna tell you her name. I just want you to know that I'm number 6 or 7. And I had the same fourth grade teacher that my mother had. And it was her fourth grade teacher that pulled her ear and tied her left hand behind her back in the classroom until she learned to write right-handed. Some of y'all waited whatever age to be saved. Let me tell you something. When I was in 3rd grade, I loved my 3rd grade teachers. I was just saying, oh Lord, I can't fail. I can't flunk no test. But can you please remove her before we get to 4th grade, before the end of summer break? I don't know how to be right-handed. God, please help me. I learned how to call on all them gods. count all the stars, the constellation, the moon, the sun, the blades of grass, the fish of the sea, the fowl in the air, all them little creepy things pouring wild on dry dirt and digging up night crawlers, all this stuff, because I was like, oh my goodness. And you know what my mother told me? And you will not be writing right-handed. And if she tries to make you do that, you come and tell me, Mama, I got 5 siblings older than you. I'm the only one that's left-handed. What do you mean if? You done told me all these nightmare stories about your hand being behind your back. I can't do that, Mama. But you know I'm gonna be obedient because I don't know how to be disobedient either. It was such a quandary as a 4th grader. But all I can tell you, the moral of the story is the revision didn't work. Being revived did. And decades later, I found out when I was arguing with God on one of my DE experiences. I know people call them death experience. I call them divine experience. I know people call them NDEs, that's near death experience, but no, I had DEs and I'm just calling them divine experiences. And in one of those experiences, let me tell you, I was having a pity party right in front of the Lord. Since we're going to talk, God, let's talk. Because let me tell you something about what I got going on in this world that you're trying to save me back to. Oh my goodness, that was one of those times when I was just talking about how come I gotta be the only one that's left-handed? How come I gotta be the only one to get straight A's? How come? How come? How come? How come I gotta be the one to obey all the time? And I was doing that with God. And he said, what side is my son sitting next to me on? I said, you're right. That's my whole point. Matthew 25, goats on the left, lambs on the right. I'm living a lamb's life. That's the L I got. I got my license and I'm living a lamb life, God. That's a tripod. Come on now. And then he said, that's interesting. Because that would be if you were looking at me. But what about if I'm looking at you? What's the mirror image? You don't ask that to a scientist, researcher, inventor, analyzer. You know what I said? Left. And then I just had in my mind, left, 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 right, left. And when we played Double Dutch, some of y'all know what the rest of those lyrics are. I ain't gonna say them. I'm just gonna say my back is aching, my left, 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 right, left. I won some double dutching contests off of that, and I was saying in words too. So I got this epiphany that I actually didn't want. And then we had to have the GOAT conversation. So if you get to choose, you can either be the greatest of all times, or you can be the lamb. What kind of answer is that? I'm talking about being a goat. I'm talking about, I'm trying not to be a kid. We couldn't even say kid. That was like a cuss word. You had to say children. I don't know this whole call your kids kids, but now I realize that a kid, a baby goat is a kid, but I could never say kid. That's an insult. And as a person of color, how dare you? How dare you? You better not call anybody a kid, and you better know that you're not. My mother never in 90 years called me a kid. Never, never. I was a child. I was a daughter. We were my parents' children. But what we weren't were kids. So I'm having this conversation, with the Lord. So now, okay, I understand the mirror image. Okay, okay, I got that wrong on the test. Come on, because I got to get an A. So just keep asking me questions, God. And once I realized the importance of an escape, that Jesus was a scapegoat for me and he died so I didn't have to. And even when my flesh goes back to the earth, I get to transition from life to life. It wasn't even hard intellectually, but I sure didn't have no wisdom. I had a will and I had some zeal, but it wasn't according to knowledge. So I need you all to be transformed and believe with me. You know, that was such a commanding approach. So I do apologize for that. I can't make any of us do anything. It's really difficult for us to manage us 86,400 seconds a day over a tenth of a year, multiple seconds just in a 40-day revival. Yet here we are. Yet here I am, defying the odds. So as much as I'm saying what I need you to do or what need to happen is, it's really just an invitation because I can't take your zeal. You can't take my will. So we may as well ask God to forgive us, forgive ourselves, forgive each other, and strive for a ministry of reconciliation because it's possible. Now, this Judas Wednesday. Can you hear that snore? Get that in. I wish you could see that. You see, yeah. So y'all to see the where we was walking. That's actually so right on this side. Let me see. Can you see? Can you see Sakari down there? They is not smooth clean out. And you hear me roll, I'm rolling all around. They ain't doing enough but snore. So if you hear something, that's still back there snoring. Thank you for liking and loving my videos and pictures of them. They have helped me on this 40-day journey. So let's get into this Judas thing. There's some things that I promise you, and I'll tell you how I'm gonna get done, how we're going to accomplish that, because we are. But I tell you, I just said, oh, Lord, how in the world can we get through this stuff about Judas? So Judas ended up being juicy. I done told y'all, if you, whatever kind of novel, you better keep on writing because this is some good old stuff. These people that wrote that was willing to write in the midst of it all. Whew, thank you, Jesus. So we're going to talk about juicy Judas, not just the betrayer. Well, let's see. So it's day 36. 3 and 6 is 9. That's actually 3 threes. If you split the 6 into threes, but you got 9 plus a 5, which is a 14, and a 1 and a 4 is grace. And we already had our 414 left to right, right to left. And today is April 16th, and we already know that this is also Nisan. If we're looking at the Hebraic year, this is 5785. That's the year that we're in Hebraically, and it's a double grace year. It's not going to happen again, not in our lifetimes. So as we look at the Gregorian calendar, which is the one that we follow, the numerology about each day has just been fascinating. And you probably, maybe some of you can, but most can probably not even appreciate this whole magnetizing magnetic draw of the revival just in the numbers. So let me just say that those of you who are loving the numbers but don't play the lottery, numbers came from God. You need to learn how to count. It's okay. Because by the time he got to 7, he was so tired of us that he had to rest. And we get to go all the way up to infinity and beyond. Yes, because you know what the beyond is? It's the kingdom time zone. Well, it's almost coaching time. It's almost coaching time. I'm so close to the day that I could put a slide up with the phone number that y'all gonna text if you want to be part of that first group coaching session. I've given you, now you got the QRS code, so you can already be donating, but I'm gonna give you a number to text in a few days. You've been with me this long, maybe let's stay for a few days, right? So the provision needs no revision, only reviving. And I know that we're standing at the crossroad, and I know that the cross that we're bearing is getting so much closer to the crucifixion that it's hard to see the resurrection on the horizon. But let me assure you, all of us are going through incredible things during this Passion Week. So much and so we can't even testify about everything that's going on because we have to step back, and it takes us aback when we are looking from a vision that's not documented by Habakkuk. I love it. 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 So I do believe in social justice, and I do believe that we're living in a time when, even though iniquity abounds and the love of many wax cold, I still have hope. I do. Because every time I've hoped, my faith has swallowed it up, and it became part of my quill, and it helped me to stop signing leases on properties that were never even built, and to stop being evicted because somebody else wasn't paying their rent when mine was on time. And I had to learn to forget about the prequel and the sequel and to live in the quill. So I invite you, live in your quill, write your story, because we're getting ready to read a story about Spy Wednesday. I am positive that Judas would love to give us his version. Maybe he did. Stick around and see. But to get to social justice, we got to make sure it's about just us. And if it's about just us, it can only be about just us if it's about just Jesus. So I invite those of you to go get your elements as we bless them when we come to the end. This will be the 36th time. And even 37, because on those two-parters, I do it both times. So go on and get what you got. And it is good. It is well. What is a spy doing on Wednesday? This Passion Week is day 4, even though it's Wednesday. Why is it day 4? Because we count Palm Sunday. So we're at Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And some of you, I know, I can't do it the other way. Like I can't do 3 like this. Well, I could roll my tongue. I got a granddaughter that could roll her tongue. So when ain't nothing, like when there's a whole bunch of noise going on and we don't have no lyrics to do, we'll just go and not even say anything. And then it just, between us, it's just an amazing thing. So, I have a grandson that can count this way. 1, 2, 3. I can't even do it because I have to do 3 like this. How do you count? It is just, we did that one day in our Bible study. It was fascinating, the things we found out. So it is Wednesday, but Sunday is coming. And today is day 4. Wednesday is day 4 in our Passion Week, where we need to have compassion on ourselves, grace to ourselves, so we can be prepared for what's to come. Because when it gets here, it's going to be now whenever we look at it. I promise you all that I would give this slide back to you. Okay, and I'm gonna count, give you a few seconds. You can push rewind if this is important to you, or you can do a snapshot right now, because I did do this 2 days in a row. But what I didn't do, I don't think, is give you the lyrics. And it's a song that has a lot of merit, an older hymn that we can do multi-generationally. So whatever genre you prefer, you can look at these lyrics and you can allow it to not be noise and actually make your own song, put your own music to it. But I promised you I'd give you the lyrics, and here they are. It's Wednesday, but Sunday is coming. I had only one slide when I started studying this thing earlier today, and I've been trying to get ahead. You know, I've been wanting to do live, then I've been trying to get ahead, and it's just the normal stuff that we ain't spending no seconds on. It's Wednesday, but Sunday is coming. What happened on Wednesday? Holy Wednesday commemorates the bargain of Judas as a clandestine spy among the disciples. So, in other words, we may say today he was creating a coup because he was sitting at the table with the master himself. But remember what happened, and it's only in John 12. What happened in John 12? What happened in John 11? What happened in John 12? What were the defining events? As I keep going, somebody tell us what the answer is. It's also called Spy Wednesday or Good Wednesday in Western Christianity, and Great and Holy Wednesday in Eastern Christianity. So the tenebrae to the right, the picture that you're looking at, candelabra-ish. It is not a menorah. This is its own candle construct called a tenebrae. It's a religious service of Western Christianity, which is held during the 3 days preceding Easter resurrection, is characterized by the gradual extinguishing of candles. So no, it's different than Kwanzaa. It is different than the menorah. So what this does, and let us count: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What's that middle one? 8. Then let's start right to left, because I just did left to right, but I know it's a mirror image, so it don't really matter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the one in the middle gives us 8. So even though it totals 7 and 7 is 14, then that middle one would be 15, and then the 1 indivisible and the 5 being grace, and then we put that 6 together, and then that being a number of humankind, now we can see choice to the left and choice to the right. Very important, because that's exactly what was happening with Judas on this day. He had to make some decisions. Yes, you are correct if you put that in John 11, Lazarus was raised from the dead, but in John 12, after Lazarus was raised from the dead, he and his sisters, Mary and Martha, put on a banquet for Jesus. And then remember, the religious leaders and the political leaders, they sought to kill Lazarus again, because the very fact that he was raised from the dead, and it was miraculous, but now there's this party and people are listening to Jesus, and now Jesus' following is increasing, so much and so that the Sadducees and the Pharisees said we need to put our differences aside, because if we don't get rid of this Jesus somehow, we can't do it publicly, because we're going to lose all credibility, and we sure can't ask him, because he always hemming us up in these riddles. So we got to get together and put our brains together, because if their mind had been made up, they would have never done it. And we got to get in. We need an insider, and he got all these chosen folks. So we just need somebody to come in and get us some information. They didn't know how they were going to do it. And they did not approach Judas to do it. But remember when Mary alabaster box perfume, when it was open, we knew it was real, because it overshowered even whatever the food smelled like that Martha was cooking in the kitchen. It just overwhelmed. And then Judas was like, this is expensive perfume. This could have been sold, and we could have done something. Could have bought all kind of stuff for the poor people. But then Jesus said, you know what? I knew that you ain't really talking about the poor, because you know what? You're a betrayer, because he knew that in his heart right then when Judas did that. But Judas had not made a decision to betray Christ at that time, but that seed ended up getting planted in some ground that he didn't even know was fertile for forsaking, for being frustrated. He didn't even realize that. But this tenebrae, what happens is candles are put out over time. And you know why? The strepitus, which is the loud noise that's heard in total darkness at the end of the services. Do you know how loud silence is? And how dark noise is? That's what this part of Passion Week represents. This I got out of Wikipedia, so I tell you all where I get it, and AI, I do know what it means, even though there were some people that didn't when asked publicly. It's Wednesday, but Sunday is coming. Judas agrees. So I told you all on yesterday that I would help you know why that one slide that shows things kind of overlapping, not as clean as we do on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because similar to how it was in the beginning, God, and we know from day one all the way through the Sabbath on day 7 that the evening and the morning were day 1, the evening and the morning were day 2. It's never the morning and the evening, because we always are going from dark to light. We don't go from light to dark, because that's what steals our hope. Our hope is destroyed when we start dark and then try to get to light. So we don't have to try to do that, because God, he made that concrete just in how he did creation, because the evening and then the morning were. So you've been a day star from the beginning when you were ex nihilo. So these days, did the betrayal happen before the Last Supper, during the Last Supper, after the Last Supper, in the Garden of Gethsemane? And all those have different day constructs if all we're doing is using our earthly time zones. So I need to get you into the kingdom time zone, because that also is going to be that first coaching group. Is there, you're going to become experts at understanding the kingdom time zone and then applying it to redeem time while you're on earth, because the right hand of your equal sign is going to be mastery of how to manage seconds, not even minutes. And then you're going to add years, success, prosperity, wealth, all that. So I am going to teach you that for those who choose to be in this first coaching session. And yes, I'm hearing y'all, but I promise you, I fixed this thing where it said to rename. I guess I'm not saving it, so I'll try to figure that out. This is what happened to these folks that left-handed, because we don't write. We don't just write left-handed. We live in a right-hand world. So it's not about writing. It's just about living in life. So I learned how to be a left-handed lamb and live. So did the betrayal happen before the Last Supper? Did it happen during the Last Supper? Did it happen after the Last Supper? Did it happen in the Garden of Gethsemane? And depending upon how you count, it's the same answer. Any quiz that I give you every day, it's the same 3-letter answer. And the answer, yeah, even in this, is still yes. So it's important to know how we count, and then you get to choose the context in which you can process the information, and that's going to be your choice. But it is important for you to seek that preference, because in doing so, it's going to allow you to have a made-up mind instead of just having your brain racking with pain. I'm not asking you to have a miracle migraine. I'm asking you to just be revived and let all that pain go. But you got to do it at a level of mindfulness, not brainfulness. And we have to respect other people that way too. And when we do, then all of a sudden we can't call anyone out of their name in a disrespectful fashion, because all of us are lifelong learners. And we're trillionth of a billionth of a second away from being unjust, instead of making it about just us. Keep your body under subjection, get your brain right. The only way you can do that is to get your mind right. So you need to be mindful and do it 6 minutes every hour that you wait. It'll transform your life, I promise. And then you get to come and testify. So focusing on the timeline is what I told you I was going to do today. I am going to hopefully be able to show you one slide about that. But now that I know what I need to share regarding Wednesday, even though it's just these 3 scriptures and references, and then it's just a 1-pager slide. Once we get more into this character and in the story writing, this particular day is going to help us in our own story writing, so that we are all writing our own stories. I don't want you to be afraid to hold the pen of your life. Don't trust anyone else with it, even when you feel like you can't trust yourself. Don't give up your pen. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So we're going to worry less about the when, because as long as we know that whenever it is, there had to be now faith. Since today is yesterday's tomorrow, we ain't got to worry about the future because we're always living in it. So trust me on it when I tell you that even if you don't sign up for the coaching on Kingdom Time Zone, I'm still going to show you during our time together in revival how to count hours, how to count watches, how to count Hebraically, not just from a Gregorian time clock perspective. So I'm committed to doing that. But Wednesday, let me tell y'all. So when did Judas agree to betray Jesus? Some people are going to tell you, no, it wasn't Wednesday, it was Tuesday. Others are going to tell you, no, it wasn't Tuesday, it was Thursday. And some are going to say, well, it had to be Wednesday because that's that middle number, that Tanakh, that it had to be. So, well, it's going to depend on how we count. Just remember that where God always takes us is from death to life, from night to morning, always. So we're going to look at the Synoptic Gospels because there's a key difference in John's account that I'm going to talk about tomorrow. So we're going to look at it synoptically, meaning Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew 26, we're in the 26th chapter already in Matthew. Judas betrays Jesus. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, this is important. I just told you they didn't seek him out. He sought them out. So they did not, the Sadducees and Pharisees, nor their representatives, the scribes, the publicans, they did not seek out Judas. Judas sought them out. And these are apostles. These are stomped down, fine, dressed to the nine, anointed. These ain't no ugly, decrepit folks. These good-looking people making a lot of money and following Jesus. So Judas was somebody. He was one of the 12. So he knew how to get access to the chief priest. And he said, what will you give me? This is why it's very different when Jesus was hungry, being tempted by that low down father of lies who've been lying since the beginning of time. Satan, when he was hungry then, was very different when he was hungry right before he had to go into the temple, because being betrayed by your own is very different than just having a spiritual attack. It really is. It's a whole different level of misery that we have to learn how to forgive and release instead of trying to revise, because you can't revise misery. You just got to cast it out and make sure that you don't just cast it out in your living room and you got like these things, but they to my left and to my right. Because if they go into them, then guess what? They're going to be able to get back at me. That's why we'll say, take the children out. We get ready to have an altar call. But that isn't even what Jesus said. That's not biblically sound. When we bring faith to the table, then we don't have to worry about, we don't have to be miserable. We anoint them children because we don't want no garbage going on. And we need our youth. We need them today. We need them today. The ones that just got conceived while I'm talking. And the ones that's been here, and I don't care how bad they are, I don't care how they get labeled. Don't you let nobody tell you that you got bad kids, because you don't have no bad kids. You got some baby sheep. Mary had a little lamb. But the beauty of this thing is that this particular lamb became a shepherd. So that's the kind of transforming I'm talking about. That's why we can't get rid of these animals. I'm trying to tell y'all, because we got to look at them, we got to watch them, and then we got to learn from them, because we got to grow up. And when we grow up, when we go from a kid to a goat, different chromosome, to a lamb, different chromosome, to a sheep, different chromosome, grown to a shepherd, show got different chromosomes. So goats, sheep, and humans all have different chromosomes and an actual different DNA, RNA structure. What will you give me if I deliver him over to you? And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment on, he sought an opportunity to betray him, because they paid him for the job before he ever did it. Now, what I love about this Matthew account, Matthew is actually the only one who gives us what was Matthew's job. We know, yes, as a tax collector, who actually, by organizational structure, even though they were all apostles, Matthew would have had an accountability to Judas because he was the chief treasurer. So Matthew gives opportunity to call out the money of the thing. Mark, then in chapter 14, verses 10 and 11, then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, so we're not confused about which Judas it was. It was Judas Iscariot, father's name was Simon, and he took an opportunity to betray instead of obey. So then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. So this synoptic writer, John Mark, we already know about all of his background in detail. So he's given us less, but it always gives us more. And then when they heard it, these chief priests, when he went to betray Jesus, when they heard it, they were glad. They were glad that finally someone was breaking the silence of the circle of the Savior. They were so excited about it. Do you see that they hurried up and turned into Finland folks? They got happy, they got glad, and they promised to give him money. And then he sought an opportunity to betray him. In Luke chapter 22, verses 3-6. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was the forerunner of the 12. So now that's telling us even more of why he should not have done it, because Jesus trusted him in his org structure to be a senior executive in the room of the executives. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and the officers. When someone shows you who they are, just believe them. Yes, that is Mr. Zakari that you see getting up and Well, he's probably gonna go lay on his bed because he wants the floor while it's cool. Then he wants to go get on his cot. So Satan got into him. He was of the number of the 12. He went away. He conferred with the chief priests and the officers how he might betray him to them, and they were glad, and they agreed to give him money. And so, because they're willing to pay him, because he went to them and said, "What will you give me? How much is it worth to you to have me rat out Jesus?" So they said, "Okay, we'll give you this much, 30 pieces of silver." So he said, "Okay." And then from that point on, he was looking for an opportunity to betray him to them. But look at what Luke tells us, in the absence of a crowd. So he didn't want to be conspicuous. He wanted to remain inconspicuous. He just had gotten hangry. I just often think if he just would have paused and did those 5 things, if he just would have given himself 6 minutes of every hour, how would that have nurtured his mind so that he could put his brain, his body under subjection and make better decisions? What we do know is that we have an opportunity to. So on Wednesday, this is really the key thing that stands out as it relates to the what that happened, which is why I thought I was going to be able to get further in our revival on this 4th day and day 36. We just doing all this counting. We doing all this up and down, down to 5. We have so much going on. We got the 3, 6, 5 happening, and we're still in month 4, so it's easy for us to go 3, 4, 5, 6 if we want to do that as well, and we can even do 8. These are the 3 scriptures. The synoptic gospels, John isn't listed here because John explains things differently from a different lens. Of these 3, which ones would have also been at the Last Supper? The for sure's, right? We know Luke wasn't. He was a contemporary of Paul. As much as we want to believe that John Mark was, he may have been way younger and too young to have that seat at the table. But what we do know, we know the tax collector was at the table, and we know that the betrayer was at the table. We know the denier was too, but Wednesday keep Peter out of Wednesday. Wednesday, it's important to understand the treasurer and the tax collector. It's important to know that on Wednesday, the folks that was in charge of the money got funny. And they should have just had some big faith, because they did something that ended up not even being worth it. Don't revise it. Just wake up and revive. And if you look and people look like trees, then go wash your eyes and go back again, because I've been doing that. I got stuff going on with my eyes. Anyway, these are the 3 scriptures. So now let's talk about Judas. Was he petty? Was he seeking pity? Was he really concerned about the poor? Or did he do something that was really priceless? And I could add, pathetic. The value of 30 pieces of silver. That's what he agreed to. He went to them. They did not come to him. He went to them. They gave him a price. He agreed to the price to betray. So how much is it anyway? The value of 30 pieces of silver that Judas received to betray Jesus is difficult to determine precisely in today's money due to the complexities of ancient economies. and the lack of direct equivalence. Well, I would change this is from our Google search engine. So this is, the AI, which I said I know it means our artificial intelligence at work that I'm trying to, understand it, but I told you I got some knowledge, but it ain't according to the zeal, but I do have a will, so I'm working on it. So where this says the complexities of ancient economies, I really think that the money exchange rate is much more complicated today than it would have been then. But that's what pops up. You can put it in to see. However, estimations suggest that it would have been a very significant sum. In fact, probably equivalent to several months of wages for a skilled worker. Some say it would have been at least worth 4 months of pay, is what the 30 pieces of silver would have been valued at. So the ancient economy, the value of silver, and the economic conditions in Judea during Jesus's time were difficult. Much more difficult than from a historic perspective, they say, than today. And that's pretty amazing. I've been trying to wrap my mind around that and not let my brain start hurting in the way of trying to process this to make this reality true. Because, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But we do know that there's a complexity when we look at economies. And we have some shifts in relationships right now. When we look globally, whether politically or religiously, certainly when we combine them, we are seeing a time of stress and distress, which increases our frustration and decreases our happiness, even when we have joy. So the coinage, the specific type of the silver coins, it could have been Tyrian shekels, it could have been Antioch staters, or different kinds of coinage that these 30 pieces may have been. And historically, the 30 pieces of silver were used to buy a field for foreigners. So when people couldn't afford to be buried, then this would be the amount for a decent plot in a cemetery. Guess what? We still today, people aren't even poor and they don't have enough to no insurance to be buried, or not enough insurance to be buried. And that is something that in this time of training on transition, because that is part of this whole 40-day journey, pause for the cause and make sure you got your business in order. Make sure you at least have enough money so that people don't have to work 4 months to try to get you buried. Okay, that's what we all should do. That's a requirement. So let us embrace that. Let us be revived and put our information in order. So now you might be here, Mr. All right now, because he really, 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 really doesn't want to go outside. But he hears his brother, so he's going back and forth, but he just can't help himself. He gonna go see what he's doing. There you go. You go. He's trying so hard. He's like, I don't want to go outside. I don't want to go outside, Sakari, please, please. But then he started barking, so he's just like, oh, he woke up. That's what you saw, maybe, and heard. So now we talking about funeral money. So Judas, we got a lot of stuff going on. So estimated values. Some estimations suggest that 30 pieces of silver could be worth anywhere between $200,000 and $10,000, depending on where you are on the planet right now, and the type of coin and the economic context in which it's in. So it may be, the 200 may really be 10,000, and the 10,000 could be 200 and have an equivalent value depending on where you are and the exchange rate. So that's why I say I think it is as complicated today. How much were his 30 pieces of silver worth? Well, what we do know is he had got so petty and so pitiful, and he got so mad about trying to pretend that he was concerned about the poor that he was willing to do something that was priceless. And Jesus, in his woes, in his whoa, and in his sadness, not only at Lazarus' grave, but we see that he was sad and troubled at the disposition he found the temple in. But remember, he didn't leave the temple. He just corrected what was going wrong, and he still stayed in the temple and taught. So we just know that it is substantial. And you know about that 4 to 6 months worth of salary. So you see this somewhere between, in America, about $91.28 all the way up to like $441.28, which is so interesting because just look at those numbers and we don't have time to talk about it. And then the 4 months, there's all kind of stuff going on up in there. So Judas and the judicials joined. From the moment he plants a kiss on Jesus of Nazareth in the Garden of Gethsemane. No, we're not there on Wednesday. So that's why it gets goofy and you have to follow and process the broader. We have multiple timelines going on here. So was it Tuesday? Was it Wednesday? Was it Thursday? The answer is yes, depending upon how you're counting. So here, this first bullet is talking about the kiss in the garden. He had been paid by then. But by identifying Jesus to the authorities, he put into motion, this is such a critical underscoring for this day 36 and 5. It's very important to know that that one decision set things in motion, a series of events that he wouldn't be able to erase because of a decision that he made in his heart that he could have corrected if he had used his mind, but he allowed his brain to think him into a situation that he couldn't tax his way out of. There were a series of events that started happening and then became foundations of our Christian faith. So some of us are saying, thank you, Judas. Thank you for going to the judicials and joining up with them. Thank you, because now we have a right to the tree of life, but that's still wrong thinking on our part. So when Jesus got arrested, went on trial, so we don't have to, even though we go through tribulation, his death by crucifixion, and eventually his resurrection. And all of this is known as the Passion of Christ. That's how we get into this Passion Week vernacular. So some take the position religiously, politically, societally, that it was necessary for Judas to represent humanity through betrayal so that we could now be able to revive versus revise. Given how little we actually know about him from the Bible, Judas Iscariot remains to this day one of the most enigmatic and important figures in Jesus's story. If you don't know, it's some things that we know. We know that Peter denied, and we know that Judas betrayed, and we know that Judas is not only did he betray, but that caused him to be portrayed as one of the initial successful suicide attempters in the Word of God. Well, hope. Suspend that. I already have you kind of suspending that from almost 2 weeks ago now, probably. So when we look at Judas, what comes to mind when you think of Judas? How many of you have named your sons Judas? Yeah, probably nobody. So in recent years, there's something very interesting. There has been this discovery of what is called the long-lost Gospel of Judas. It is a Gnostic text, originally dating all the way back to the 2nd century, and it has led some scholars to then reconsider the role of Judas and even to ask whether he might have been unfairly blamed for betraying Jesus. This again is why you cannot give up your quill. You cannot let people rewrite your story, because thousands of years later, your name could come up when it should be something that been forgot about. And when someone tells you, no, don't be listening to the doctor. Doctor, you need that pain from your past so you can have some passion. So you ain't got to worry about making back. No. You got a story. I got a story. All God's children got a story, but all of them ain't writing their story. But you are. And one of the things that you're writing is, shut up. I'm not listening to you anymore. I have music. I no longer espouse to noise. There's power in the pen, certainly in the quill. It'll keep you from taking pills and some other stuff. Through the Bible, we see that it offers just a couple of details about Judas's background. All 4 canonical Gospels of the New Testament name him among Jesus' 12 closest disciples or apostles. So intriguingly, Judas Iscariot is the only one of the apostles of whom the Bible potentially identifies by his town of origin. We're going to talk about why that's important. Some scholars have linked his surname Iscariot to Quiriot or Kerioth, which is a town that's located just south of Jerusalem in Judea. So we're still in this same kind of geographical area. One of the things that might set Judas apart from the rest of Jesus's disciples is that Judas is not from Galilee, according to Robert Cargill, assistant professor of classics and religious studies at the University of Iowa and editor of Biblical Archaeological Review. Not sure if that's still true today, because this article was, I believe, written in 2007. So there's been a few years. Jesus is from the northern part of Israel, or what would be considered Roman Palestine area. But his surname might be evidence that he's from the southern part of the country, meaning he may be a little bit more of an outsider, which would give him potentially more believability of being a betrayer, because he wasn't from what would have been considered that close-knit community. So you can tell it just in the way that I'm communicating with you right now and explaining this, some hesitation in my voice, because I don't espouse that there are quote unquote good neighborhoods because of living through redlining and not being able to have loans approved and having to go and jump through more hoops than other people. And then when we would show up to a good neighborhood or the suburbs or in rural places, then all of a sudden there could be someone who didn't look like me, walk like me, talk like me, that could go to the political system within the municipality that I may be trying to get into. And then they could just simply say, no, we know that it's illegal to say it out loud, that we don't want her to buy the house, but we really don't want to because she has kids, and those kids, they might come, our neighborhood is gonna go to pot, and the values of our house is gonna go down. So that's the mindset and how you put it in today's context, so you can become more wise with knowledge and understanding. So he could have been a little bit of an outsider. Alternatively, others have suggested that the name Iscariot identifies Judas with the Caesarea or what was considered dagger men, which was a group of Jewish rebels who opposed the Roman occupation and committed acts of terrorism circa around 4050 AD from a timeline on behalf of their nationalistic cause. So it's also kind of thought that, you know, it could have been these terrorist acts that were saying, yeah, but we're terrorists because we're terrorists for the greater good, that he could have had some of that in his DNA. It's just quite fascinating, but there's nothing in the Bible to link Judas to those things. And they were only known to be active after his death. So we're not sure if Judas was from the South. We're not sure if he was a Sicarii. We don't know, as Cargill studied the archaeology and history. So these experts that go and look at these places and follow footprints and footsteps, because people are always trying to explain, why would he have done this? So have people gotten Judas's quill and erased it in order to justify Judas' behavior on their journey of life? So why would he have done it? That's the question. Did Judas really join the judicials? Yeah, he did. He went and he sought them out. He agreed on a price. They were happy. They were happy to give him 30 pieces of silver, and because they hadn't figured out how to get to Jesus without putting themselves in a position of degradation. Was money the motivator, or did the tempter tempt the treasurer? Well, maybe a little bit both. So according to the Gospel of John, so remember, Wednesday gives us the synoptics, but John does give an account in the 13th chapter. If we read verses 21 through 27, John actually, in his gospel, lets us know that Jesus informed his disciples during the Last Supper, which would have then either made, however we're counting, tomorrow. When does Thursday start? If you're watching this anytime after 6 p.m., then we're already moving into a ground zero hour up into the first watch, because the 8 watches start at night. So if it was during the Last Supper, was it Wednesday or was it Thursday? Yeah, so it depends on how we're going to count. But it was during the Last Supper that Jesus then said one of them were going to betray him. So when they asked who would it be, Jesus said, it's the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I dipped it in the dish. Then he dipped a piece of bread in the dish and he gave it to Judas, which John identifies as a son of Simon Iscariot. So John, the beloved, the disciple, he tells us who it was, and he tells us that Jesus at the Last Supper said, it's the one that I'm about to dip this bread in and that I'm about to give to. So now we see a different type of transparency consideration in how Jesus communicated with his own. And these own would have been not the ones that received him, not his own that supposedly received him and have been following him, put down their nets, put down their jobs, picked up their cross and followed him. So Judas, he went on his own to the priests of the temple, the religious authorities at the time, and he offered to betray Jesus in exchange for money, 30 pieces of silver, as specified in the Gospel of Matthew. Like the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Luke also cites Satan's influence. So if you are in this Passion Week and we're getting up to Good Friday and you got your Good Friday service and your 7 sayings and everything, this is going to be a very good thing to bring out. I was going to say, you know, you go look really smart if you say this part, but you know, when you anoint it, then you don't have to be trying to look smart. That's why I didn't say that out loud in this contexting. But when we look at John and Luke, they're the two gospel writers that, while giving this event, and Luke is one of the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Luke then from a synoptic gospel, if you're researching it from a synoptic gospel standpoint, you're only going to get the Luke account. Well, is there a John account? Yes, but remember John wrote differently than the other three. So then you have to, if you say synoptic, you're going to miss the John account. But Luke also says that Satan influenced Judas, that it wasn't just Judas, but again, when his brain got ahead of his mind, that allowed the tempter to come in, because the tempter tempts is what he does. So don't be expecting Satan to do something different than his job. He knows his job description and he sticks to it. So, and he has followers. So here we are. Ain't even human. It's just an amazing thing, but you all have learned that already. So the influence of Satan shows up rather than just Judas's mere greed as a reason for Judas's betrayal. John, however, made clear that Judas was an immoral man even before the devil got into him. He kept the common purse, the fund that Jesus and his disciples used to fund their ministry. And let me tell you something, in 2025, God still funds his ministry. So if he ain't funding the ministry, then maybe you need to make sure you meditate a little more and catch up on these 40 days. Because yes, Jesus had, when we look at the 12 disciples that he had, 2 12s then would be 1 6, right? When you look at that's percentage of his 12 that were responsible for the finance department. So when you put somebody over the money, you got to make sure you ain't funny with the money, because if they keep a common person, then that means they put in a little bit. Yeah, the offering was $1,000, but it's really 900 because I decided to pay myself 100 for counting it today because this revival session was just so long. So we're gonna take up an offering and we're gonna give you a piece of it, but we're gonna keep some of it. And so then he stole from the money that was for the ministry. And it is often preached and taught and stated, if you gonna steal something, don't be stealing it from the offering. Well, Judas gives us very good reason why that remains true. There have always been those who have wanted to tie Judas's betrayal to the fact that he had a love of money. Same person penning this particular article, Cargill points out, same University of Iowa professor that's writing this. Others have suggested a more political motive for his traitorous, not treacherous, act. So it was traitorous, if that's the emphasis, the way that you want to say the word. According to this theory, Judas might have become disillusioned when Jesus showed just a little bit of interest in fomenting a rebellion against the Romans and reestablishing an independent kingdom of Israel. So depending upon where he's at archaeologically, where he's at geographically, in his anthropologic posture, we can say that Judas, we could surmise, as this writer is doing, a few different perspectives and possibilities. One being that he got to a point where he was good with the spiritual, but he didn't kind of like the politics of what was happening with Jesus, because now we had to be in this kind of space of, is he just a politician? Or is he truly a committed follower of Christ? He certainly is a trusted ally simply because of his job title. Alternatively, Cargill suggested Judas, like the Jewish authorities at the time, so similarly to what was going on at that time, he could have seen a rebellion as potentially dangerous for the Jewish people in general, as in the case of the Roman destruction of Sepphoris earlier in the 1st century. Maybe he decided to hand Jesus over in effect to stop a larger rebellion. I think it is so important and my unction to share this with you on this day in the revival is to look at the similarities to where we are right now in the time that we're in, why it is so important to get into a kingdom time zone, because what this now is suggesting from a different historical perspective is that betraying Jesus was for the greater good. I don't espouse that, but I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm not afraid to give you the information that's out there that you can get. I'd rather pull, study, pray, ask God to give me proper interpretation so that anybody, whenever they look at this day, can take the time to listen, to watch, to learn, and then to give consideration, because I ain't powerful enough or smart enough to take your will from you. I can't give you no zeal. I can try to excite you. That's why motivational speakers are not the ones that create culture change. They create climate change. They come in and they turn your thermostat up if you're cold, and they turn it down if you're hot. More evangelical, because when they're done, they're gone, and you're still left to deal with the culture later. So that's why it's also important for us to know our lane, for us to understand our spiritual directive and calling and chosenness, because it really does manifest itself in the way that we lead, in the way that we live, those L's that are very important for us to replace with the negative ones. The most important fact about Judas, apart from his betrayal of Jesus, is his connection with anti-Semitic behavior. So says Joan S. I do not think it's Acosella, but you all correct me in pronunciation. Grammar is important to me. But she wrote this in the New Yorker in 2006. So you can go find the article, read it, and don't be afraid to. I have to fearlessly give you this information versus saying, well, I can't tell them that, God, because, oh my goodness, if they can say that I'm the one that showed them this, then I could be the no. I'm past that. That was in the that was the revision, Brenda. No, I'm living revived now. So I'm not afraid to give you information because I didn't create you. So you have the ability, nor am I the one that gave you choice or took it from you. So utilize your power of choice and don't be afraid of information. But that means you have to be committed to transformation. If you're not committed to transformation, then information is very conforming, and then the world chokes out the word. The historical tendency to identify Judas with anti-Semitism, it really is very stereotypical. But after the horrors of the Holocaust, which was way after Judas, so we also have to be mindful that we're just not inserting these biblical characters wherever we want to, whenever we're wherever in our own society today. We know that we don't have to worry about running into Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, but is Satan still tempting? Yes. Are people doing what they are now interpreting as their lens about Judas? Of course. And are there really people that shouldn't be messing with the money? Are there liars? Absolutely. Cheats, thieves, all of that. So yes, that's true. But we do know that this Judas, just like this mountain, just like this fig tree, this Judas ain't responsible for the Holocaust. But what it does do for those who are biblical scholars, if you're looking for a consideration of this key biblical figure, meaning the interpretation of that line in the article is Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who might have been a little bit of an outsider, and we're going to see something else that history says about his presence. So Another professor, so you see, Judas is really a very, you can see deep study around him, even though we tend not to study him because we know him based on the behavior and what we learned in Sunday school, right? So we understand that, so we tend not to delve into the depth of Judas because we see his dash as being so short. It has circular implications if we're not willing to get out of the circle. So this particular Bible scholar, William Klassen, he argues in a 1997 biography of Judas that many of the details of his treachery were invented or exaggerated by the early Christian church leaders, especially as the church began to move away from Judaism. So this scholar has now studied and written from an even different lens. So was money the motivator, or did the tempter just tempt the treasurer? Now we're getting more information so that you can decide for yourself, because that's where your revival lives. You do not have to be fearful of the revision. Just wake up, because you're not only legitimate, you're literate. So yes, you can handle it. Absolutely, you can, and you are. Is there an autobiography by the betrayer? Well, in 2006, something else. Go and check it out. The National Geographic Society made a public announcement in 2006, and they said, we have discovered and we have translated a long lost text, and it is known as the Gospel of Judas, and it is believed to have been originally written around AD 150 and then copied from Greek into Coptic in the 3rd century, and first alluded to in the writing by a 2nd century cleric, Irenaeus. The Gospel of Judas is one of many ancient texts discovered in recent decades that have been linked to the Gnostic religion. So when we see Gnostic here, and the word Gnostic means knowledge, but it doesn't mean according to, when we get Zacharias the Zealot, he had that. So we understand now that connection between zeal and knowledge, and we want to have zeal to our will, but we want to make sure that we have not only knowledge, but we need understanding, and then we can get that chiefest thing, who is referred to as the sheep, and that is wisdom. So this quote unquote possibly now discovered Gospel of Judas, Gnostics, a mostly Christian group, not all of them, who were denounced as heretics by the early church leaders for their unorthodox spiritual beliefs, therefore accused of not sure that there was a Gospel of Judas. So then what's important is that in 2006, now we get what is considered a credible source, the National Geographic Society. They made an announcement that this Gospel of Judas has now been discovered. So rather than denounce Judas as Jesus's betrayer, the author of the Gospel of Judas, now that National Geographic says exists, really glorified him as Jesus's most favorite disciple, which is why, as I pose in the title of this slide, is there truly an autobiography written by the betrayer? So Wednesday is such an important day in Passion Week for us to study Judas, even differently than I have studied him in the past. What becomes interesting as I was studying this is, oh my Lord, who had the quill of his will and now want to make a non-fiction fiction, or a fiction from nonfiction realities, because what we know now is it can be real and still not be true. Fiction is real. The people who love to read those long books I love reading, but I'm not if you give me something that's 1,000 pages, that's the other part of the researcher. I'll write the pages, but I got to get to the end of the story. When it's longer than the Bible and it's longer than all the encyclopedias but put together, and it's longer than that suitcase, than folks that went door to door and sold Britannica and World Book encyclopedias and the dictionaries. If you bought the whole thing at one time without all the payments, then you got those bonus books. And I had to do that growing up. So instead of just denouncing him, then what happens with whoever is the originator of the quill, and National Geographic Society is absolutely asserting that it was Judas the apostle, and that in his gospel, Jesus asked him to betray him to the authorities so that he could be freed from his physical body and ultimately fulfill his destiny of saving humanity. Now, this is an interpretation of Jesus saying, I didn't lose any father except the son of perdition. So then, if we buy into Judas being predestined and had no free will to not do what he did, then it would become easier to espouse the things that are now being asserted as being absolute nonfiction. So I'm not, I really, that's around that. I did a pretty good job myself around that. That was very non-committal. So, and that's intentional. I really, truly do want to give you information in this as the Lord is giving it to me, so that you will sharpen up your quill so that you can fulfill your will and zeal according to knowledge. So we don't want to be afraid to know. We don't even want to be afraid to understand. We want to be able to take our knowledge and understanding and then develop wisdom. Wisdom is a skill that you can develop based on knowledge and understanding. Minus knowledge and understanding, you're legend in your own mind, and that's the wrong hill. So controversy surrounds, obviously, the Gospel of Judas, as some scholars have argued that the National Geographic Society version really represents a mistranslation of the Coptic text, Coptic being the very first Christians, if you will, from that's another history lesson, and that the public was wrongly made to believe that the document that they have portrayed this noble Judas to be in this Gospel of Judas. So, that's why I've titled this slide, Is There an Autobiography by the Betrayer? Well, we need to study to show ourselves approved. We don't need to be ashamed. We can rightly divide the word of truth. The truth, the Holy Ghost is real. If you're a holy host to the Holy Ghost, and if you're living holy because he is, and if you're presenting your body, your soul, and your spirit and blameless before him so the Holy Ghost can live within us, you don't have to be afraid of the information that you receive, because it will bear witness, and the word always verifies itself. And when I say that, I can now say to you, I'm talking about the book of Zoe. I'm not talking about the Gospel of Judas. I'm talking about let the living God, let Logos speak inside of you. Let Rhema, let Zoe speak inside of you. That is what is very important at the stage of this world's existence that we're in, while not being of it. So now we have some argument just around Judas. So you might be hearing about that. You might be hearing about it today. Before you watch this or after you watch this, then maybe you'll be more attuned and you'll say, you know what? I had never paid attention, but yeah, I did. I saw this. I saw this on YouTube. I did see this post on Instagram. Yes, Facebook was doing it. There was something in Marketplace about Facebook about this. Oh yeah, I did see it. That was something that I saw on X. Oh wow, that's in Snapchat. I did see that on TikTok. All that. So now you'll see it. Just it's like you have the unique car until you buy one, and then you see one at every stoplight. You find out just how non-unique we are. So in any case, the fact that the Gospel of Judas was written at least a century after Jesus and Judas, after the crucifixion and after the hanging. It would have had to have been at least 100 years later. That means that it provides, maybe depending on which scholar is writing about it, little in the way of historically reliable information about either of their lives, Jesus or Judas, and certainly it doesn't provide the missing link to understand Judas Iscariot's true motivations. The biggest part of that bullet point, the biggest part of that paragraph is the question that I'm going to pose to you. Is anybody writing your story 100 years too late, and it has zero significance to who you now know you are that you didn't realize who you were almost 40 days ago? Are you motivated to take your pen back? Are you ready to wake up and be revived instead of allowing the world that we're in to revise your story, even though you know you're from the kingdom time zone? These are questions that I'm posing to you for consideration. Does this really tell the story or not? Now, this takes us back to the day that I talked about read on preaching. Remember when I talked about, even during a time where we had the canonized Bible, there still were holy hosts for the Holy Ghost that were quote unquote illiterate, regardless of which language they spoke. And so they needed read on preachers. So we do know that the word bears witness of itself. We do know that the Holy Ghost can allow the illiterate to be evangelical and people get saved because someone else is reading. How can we embrace that so easily? The whole Bible is something that is ascribed. It's ascribed. Where the commandments come from, Moses wasn't just white hair because he was 80 carrying them blocks all up and down the mountain and folks doing all this kind of crazy stuff. So now let's take all of that sting out of it, because somebody's being healed right now. And I agree with God's word concerning you right now, that you can be healed and you can stop hurting. You can stop hurting because 100 years from now, somebody will be trying to mess up your story. So you may as well pick up your pen right now. I'm agreeing with your faith right now in the mighty master's name of Jesus Christ, who I believe on. And because I believe on him and his word, I can tell you what happens when he gets down inside your belly, because he's been in mine and is right now. And remember, we talked about that teapot. So everybody talking about, I got the tea, but have they teapotted? Because there's a whole different thing, because that's just transliteration, right? Not even translation, it's transliteration. So the truth is, we don't know why Judas did what he did. That now goes back to Cargill, the first author of this writ that has like all these contributors to it. And if you start looking up this, especially now in the digital platforms, people have been able to comment. Oh, ever since 2006, people have been adding to this story. The grand irony, of course, is that without Judas's betrayal, Cargill now is suggesting, because now we on Mars Hills, right? We're talking to Aristotle. We're talking to Pluto. We're talking to Socrates. We're talking to the folks that Jesus was talking to when he was 12. We're talking to the smartest people on the planet everywhere, whether it was ebony or ivory, whichever college that you have gone to. So this is the smart folks talking to the smart folks, the chosen talking to the chosen, and the remnant of the chosen talking to the remnant that remains, giving consideration. Okay, so if Judas had not betrayed Jesus, then if Jesus hadn't gotten handed over to the Romans and crucified, then without Judas, is it plausible to say that we wouldn't have the central component of Christianity, which would then mean that we don't have a resurrection? That's why you gotta say stuff out loud. Don't let nobody get funny with the money of your mind, because your mind is priceless. Manage your brain accordingly. And it is going to take more seconds than you want to take. Do you know how many seconds this is? And I'm trying to condense this down into a few slides. Once you really are a holy host for the Holy Ghost, then God's be speaking to you and showing you this. I didn't even know these websites and stuff even existed. So as you start studying, then God can trust you more, and he reveals more to you. And he wants us to be able to discern truth from untruth. He wants us to know that if the tempter is coming to us, that it's not worth $90 and it's not worth $10,000. So don't be afraid to know who's running your country, know who's running your state, know who's running your region, know who's running your county, know who's running your municipality, your village, incorporated, unincorporated, know who's on the Supreme Court, know who's on the Senate, know who's in your house, know who's in your ministry, for those of you that are under British rule, or whatever your political construct is where you are. I suggest that you learn global. So it's not only where you live, you ought to know how the world thinks, because I will tell you what I am a strong believer of is that I still ain't seen nobody top Queen Elizabeth. So now I just say it, because now on her time, there's so much that we didn't know because of how she concealed what was supposed to be concealed. And now things that are being revealed that she, with her discernment, remain concealed, that is a ministry structure, the governmental structure. And I often quote the late Dr. Miles Monroe, because he has excellent resources that you can now go and watch free. I had all his books and paid for all of them. I was glad to and wanted more, and was trying to see where I could get. I wanted to be able to sit and listen to him face to face, because I could track with that knowledge. And he is the one that really helped me have a revelation around the structure, the governmental structure and ecclesia. So there are times that we need to connect with another holy host, with the Holy Ghost, so that now we get discernment. And with that, when we get discernment, y'all, we get deliverance, and can't nobody ever take the pen out of your hand. Not when you deliver. So fear ye not. I don't know. Is there an autobiography by the betrayer? I ain't seen it. So what I'm showing you all is the stuff that's out there. And now I've rebuked the fear. I agree with God's word concerning you that fear is gone, that faith is alive, activated. We got some big faith, and we ain't afraid to go in the temple, because it is a house of prayer, and we can kick everything out, representing the poor, representing the widows, all that stuff that the folks was doing in a deceivious way, to distract and destroy thought patterns. The issue is just the thought patterns. It's why the stories have to be told, instead of just everybody's so busy. When we get home, I don't care if you're on your phone. I don't care if you're on your tablet. I don't even care if this is your homework, if you got any, if you don't. Even if we're sitting at the same table, we're not in this mindfulness place. So now, when our minds get open to just receive all of this stuff, because what do givers and takers have in common? Neither of them can receive, but then that makes them open to be recipients of deception. Whew, that made me sweat. So y'all see that this is in a different level of fighting that I even want to fool around with. I don't even have no kind of glasses on. Satan's soliloquy sang to the Sadducees. That's my title. So every title that you see on a slide, that is directly from me. So that's doctor, every time you see the title. Because after I've studied, I said, okay, Lord, if all they can take away is 8 words or less, 10 words or less, what should the title be? So this one is Satan's Soliloquy, sang to the Sadducees. Well, we already know the interpretation of that is it was a bunch of noise. But it was noise that people paid to come to the tailgate. They paid to come to the red carpet. They paid to lay down their palms. They paid to take their garments off and take a picture. They paid for the front row seat. They paid to be able to go to the after set, all of that. So they paid for the noise. And that is what Satan is counting on. That if he brings the noise, that will bring the lyrics and will never make it a song. So then he's able to take his own soliloquy and he can sing to the Sadducees. Okay, why is that important? Summary, Judas Iscariot, now when we look at this historical account, so you go back and you look at these because I'm pulling this out for you. He was born, now this is according to documented history. So those who are scholars and are going all the way back, and we believe in fossils, we believe in dinosaurs, or, this now is that kind of thing. It's very historic documentation. So Judas Iscariot, from historic documentation, was born around 5 BCE in Kerioth, which was a village in southern Judea. Well, we heard that earlier. He was the only child of Jewish parents. So I'm just reading, I'm going through this, but you remember what the title of the slide is. So I'm giving you what you can find. You can find. So now as God has given it to me, I'm giving it back to you so that when you go and find it, you now can do it from a platform of discernment without any fear at all. Satan has soliloquies and he's singing. And he's singing to the Sadducees because it doesn't matter where you were from. And what he wants to count on is exactly this. So let's look and see what he's saying. How has he changed the betrayer's song? Because if he can get us to buy in to this, then it's easy to enact terrorism because that's one of the philosophical postures of Judas, as well as theological postures of Judas. And no, you don't have to have a doctorate degree in ministry to be able to read, because you're literate and you're legitimate and you read everything else that you want to read. And if you can tell bear and if you can gossip and if you can do all this and listen to stuff and you don't know if it's true or not, is the media even what is it telling us? Do we agree? Don't we agree? So we're doing a lot of things with our mind that our brain, as if you live to be a century old, it is still considered that we may use less than 10% of our brain. Well, that doesn't mean that a brain has been wasted. That means a mind has been wasted. And if a mind has been wasted, then we don't have the mind of Christ, and then our life isn't hidden in him. So I get all this stuff historically. So only child, Jewish parents, and parents moved to Jericho when Judas, their only child, was a boy. So this is a storyline that we have to decide, is it true? Because this is now, if we believe the scholars and we believe that this is historic, we have to not be afraid to give it consideration, because we have to give it consideration in order to get discernment. And if we never are inside of another building again, whatever we call it, a church, a mosque, a synagogue, a cafeteria, a mall, a restaurant, whatever, if we don't have a gathering place, we can still gain knowledge because of these incredible digital platforms. So here's where we get into Satan's soliloquy saying to the Sadducees. Judas's parents, of whom he was an only child, as discovered through historical documentation, they were Sadducees. And when their grown son joined John the Baptist, they had to disown him. So this historical account is saying Judas was the only child. His parents moved to Jericho. They were Sadducees. We've already talked about them. Go 2 days ago and relook at that revival session. The Sadducees. So now when Judas grew up, this historical account suggests that he was a disciple of John the Baptist, Jesus's cousin, before he was an apostle of Jesus Christ. So his parents had to disown him because he made a decision as an only child to go against his parents, and politically and socially, they then had to disown him in order to remain true to who they were societally, politically, and religiously. So that is a trifecta against the parents or against the son, whichever way we go. 2 parents and 1 child is 3. So one day while Judas was with John's group as one of John's disciples, he was asked by Nathanael, one of the apostles, to come and follow Jesus. He was 30. This is Judas now. What this historical account is saying is that at that time when Nathanael evangelized did a revival, where he preached to, when he witnessed to Judas, he said, hey, come follow us, because we got the real thing. We know what happened to John the Baptist. It's so sad, but let me tell you, Jesus, you can follow him. It is true what John said about him. So Judas at that time was 30 years old, unmarried. He was the 12th and last of the apostles to be selected. Important point of history. He and the other apostles were ordained by Jesus. This historical account actually gives a date. So we have a date and time stamp from this historical account. January 12, 27 CE. His role was treasurer of the group, and he had an assignment that he faithfully discharged for about 4 years. So again, here we're saying historically, is it 4 years because that counts the year that he was a disciple for John? Here I'm learning with you. So this is where that I've been saying to you all that the questions that make us go, that make us have to redip our pen. Here's to me where it just starts sounding funny, but I don't know. I'm just going to read it and you give your opinion. But this is what this writer says. Judas was a spoiled child who became a vengeful, intolerant man. He misunderstood Jesus' mission, questioned Jesus' wisdom and his decisions, and these factors and others, they led to the betrayal of Jesus. Upon recognizing this mistake on the day of Jesus' death, then Judas committed suicide. But in his early life, being born in Kirioth, a small town in southern Judea, he was the only son of a very wealthy but very unwise parents. Simon, his father, moved the family to Jericho when Judas was just a lad. He was a businessman, and young Judas became his assistant. Judas was a pampered and spoiled child who grew up believing himself important and superior. Because of this distorted self-appraisal, he became a poor loser, quick to criticize, hate, suspect, and seek vengeance. I don't know. It's just, if that's what you're writing about yourself, erase it right now. Erase it right now. And whoever is writing that paragraph about you, get your pen back. Because if any word of that is true, the posture in which it has been written by the quill of the writer, and what we do know is that it wasn't Judas at this point. So when Judas matured, according to this quill holder, he became interested in the preaching of John the Baptist. Judas's parents were both Sadducees who opposed John's teaching. After joining John, his parents disowned him. He was looking for employment in a fish drying business in Thyatira with the 6th apostle, Nathaniel. That's when Nathaniel approached him about joining Jesus's group of apostles, even though what Judas was looking for was a job. So the life as an apostle. Nathaniel chose Judas, number 12 of 12, mainly because of his business experience. Judas was 30, didn't have any children when he joined Jesus's group. He was the only Judean. The other 11 were from Galilee. That part is very intriguing for you all that want to go and research that further. Judas, being a good businessman, far-seeing and able financier, he took this responsibility very seriously during his 4 years with the group, and he never failed as its treasurer. He did his job, he learned his job, he did it well. He kept the group's money, and he kept a record of all their expenses. He estimated the budgets for Matthew, so that Matthew could then go and gather the funds. He knew exactly how much it was going to cost to run the ministry, because they really weren't just walking around with nothing waiting for manna to fall from heaven. These were people that were already making money when Jesus then came and selected each of them. So Judas was good at what he did, responsible for the money, and he got the authorization, according to this historical account, when Matthew had to distribute the funds when and where Andrew authorized them to be distributed. So now we got a whole lot of stuff going on. We got Andrew, who's the brother of Peter, Andrew being credited as being the first apostle and the one who identified the boy with the 2 fish and the 5 loaves of bread. And Andrew, in his leadership position, because now I'm talking to business leaders, I'm talking to you all that need some consultation, you need some coaching, you need some R&D work. So now we have, from a business structure, just from a business structure, take it all the way out of religion, take it out of politics, a good businessman. Judas is who you wanted on your team. More of a goat than a sheep, because he didn't have to be led, and he's going to take care of business, and he's going to eat the copper so that anything that came behind him won't go eat it and choke. So he knew what he was doing. He was contemporary, same age as Jesus. Nathaniel, trusted witnesser, representative, because these folks have been trained by John. So John the Baptist. So now we see here, he got a job. He looked for a job. Okay, he got hired. He was not only an apostle. Nathaniel witnessed to Judas because there was an opening. There was an opening, and it was a vote in, call in, wait in, buy in. There was an opening. They needed somebody that knew how to do the money. Nathaniel brought him. Andrew validated him. He then got promoted, coming in to be the one that will oversee, while Matthew went out and collected. That's why when now we look at the Matthew account, he's the only one that gives us a price tag in specificity. So now you can go back and see that. Whew, that was fun. I hope somebody else liked that. So why would he do it? Why would he do it? So this historic document says, as a follower of John the Baptist before becoming an apostle, Judas asked Jesus why nothing was being done to get John out of prison, because now John is in prison wrongfully. And remember, we found that when the Sadducees and Pharisees decided their differences weren't enough, that they needed to collaborate because they couldn't answer Jesus' question and they didn't know how to get rid of him. So now we get Judas, who went and sought them. All of that is what this is saying, what this writer is saying historically. But again, this is where it kind of gets, the money gets funny with me on this as we keep reading. So if Judas really was angry that nothing was being done to get John out of prison, and John was the one who witnessed to him so he could get saved, if we look at it from that leadership lens, he was disappointed, Judas, with Jesus's apparent lack of concern. Because of pride, Judas resented being corrected, which Jesus had to do on more than one occasion. Pride and his superior attitude also kept Judas from forming close relations with Jesus and the other apostles. Judas was an antisocial and hypocritical individual who kept score of perceived wrongs and refused to engage in friendly exchanges. Does this sound like anybody that has stole your pen and wrote that lie about you? I mean, even with everything that did happen with Judas, come on now. If we're going to give an account, this is some flagrant files up in here. They ain't using no good ink on this, writing this, because that's a whole lot of words coming up in there to describe, especially since this couldn't have been written by anybody that was there at the time. So Judas, in this quote unquote antisocial, hypocritical position as a person, he was also prejudiced against Samaritans and Galileans. The fact that all the other apostles were from Galilee and that Jesus preached love for Samaritans and other Gentiles, that only increased Judas's long-held prejudices. So now we got an anti-Semitic who's not from Galilee and whose parents have rejected him, who got saved under John the Baptist, who had to look for a job because he couldn't work for his daddy no more, got a job with Jesus, but hated everybody else on the team. And not only was he antisocial and hypocritical, he was also prejudiced. Okay. If it's all true, all I'm saying is it sounds like some flagrant files up here. It sounds like somebody that took a quill, even against the betrayer. That's why when Jesus could have judged everyone, remember? In the temple, when we see he was hungry, all he wanted was one fig. And even though he was hungry, and he waited till the next day and he had to go back to the temple again. And in the midst of all that, when the apostles wanted him to judge, he said, "My Father didn't send me to judge the world." I'm living in John 3:17. I'm still in Nicodemus mode. No. I was not sent into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through me might be saved. So on our worst day, when we have been condemned, and even if we're a Judas, no one has a right to now create flagrant files against us, because it's still only for a season. And there's a reason for your season. And now, all these years later, as many years later as we are reading these Gospels in Passion Week, here we have this line that is espoused widely. I did look at that, even though I didn't put it in a slide, because you want to know more than those of you who want to know more, then you're going to look further anyway. When Jesus refused to be crowned the King of the Jews at the feeding of the 5,000, remember, only miracle that's in all four Gospels, Judas thought Jesus was coward and timid. Jesus knew that Judas was a risk, but he wanted his 12th and final apostle to have every chance to enter back into the spiritual kingdom with the other 11 that he knew. Okay, well then, first of all, how are we going to do this without having Peter in here? But okay, so the teacher did everything possible to persuade the student, but nothing could be done to save the one who refused to give up pride, who refused to give up anger, who refused to give up revenge, and who refused to not come out of his personal isolation. Okay, this is a storyline. I tell you what, if this is what they showing you as a preview of the next season, and if this is what you're saying in your comments, that you want to see what happens in the sequel, which is probably going to be a prequel for the quill, because they don't ever give you the quill anymore. They got to wait to see what you want and how sad you really are. So now, oh my goodness, isn't there something I really want to stop and laugh? I got to just keep reading. So now at the feeding of the 5,000, now we see the teacher did everything to try to help him out. But he had so much pride, he had so much anger, he wanted so much revenge. He wanted to remain isolated. Next sentence, Judas never learned to deal with disappointment. He never learned how to confide in his fellow apostles. He never learned how to forgive. He never learned how to face facts. And he never learned to realize that spiritual rewards don't always come immediately. He wasn't willing to be patient. So when Jesus sent the apostles to pray, Judas instead nursed his wounded pride, and he plotted revenge. Now, it's just a good storyline if you read it out loud. Just because it's documented is real. This is real black and white, or whatever these colors are. But that don't make it true. And that's why we have to study. And that's why we need discernment, because we can arm wrestle and decide if we want to believe any, all, or none of this. However, if we get stuck in the revision, then we'll never get to our revival, because we'll be caught up in the storyline that doesn't matter, because what matters now is our mind to keep our brain and body under subjection, because our body is a temple of the Holy Ghost. He was very sensitive to ridicule, to be ridiculed for following Jesus. He was sensitive that he ain't like people telling him, oh, you following Jesus now? I thought you was following John. Your parents had to give you up because you were following John. Now you're going to follow Jesus? Why don't you just go back home? When his Sadducean friends chided him, Judas burned with shame and embarrassment. One of the final episodes. Do y'all read this? The sign is up here. I got the slide up here. I was just like, oh my goodness, Lord. I don't even, we ain't got these many seconds, but you know, can't say that. I repented about that. So anybody that ain't watching, oh well, but those who are interested in this story, I told you, it's some juicy stuff about Judas. It doesn't make it true just because it's written down. It's a real document, but that don't mean it's true. But we gotta ask God, Lord, show me, because I'm not going to ask you. Now, with this embarrassment, with this shame, with this burning pride on the inside, one of the final episodes that led to the betrayal of Jesus' decision to enter into Jerusalem on a donkey during the Passover. That and another incident when a wealthy female admirer, well, we know who that was. It was Lazarus' sister. We know it was Mary. This was Martha's sister. We know who it was. The wealthy female admirer poured expensive incense on his feet, tipped the balance for Judas's betrayal. Judas protested, calling it a waste and saying that the money would be better spent feeding the poor. Well, we read what the scripture said in all of the three accounts, in the account where it is, because remember, this one is only in John. So you're so much smarter than the people that's right now. That's how come you saying, what? I hear some of y'all right now. Well, who wrote that? Who said that? Don't even sound like scripture. Well, you know that's how come. But what you watching? What's your favorite series right now that you binging on that you know ain't bit more true, but it appeals to something inside of you? So that's why I want you to be appealed, so you will go and search and hear what the Lord is saying to you about it. So this admirer, that this storyline says, Judas protested, calling it a waste of money and saying that the money would be better spent feeding the poor. And when Jesus rebuked him and praised the admirer for her love and for her faith, then Judas was angered to the point of vengefulness. He then decided that he would get even for all the hurt. Oh, somebody up there hurting the church? Judas? Judas wasn't the perpetrator. He was the prey. Oh, we've learned about that. Every perpetrator was a prey at some point, but whether perpetrator or prey, the question is, are you a preyed up? Because if you're preyed up, then you don't have to worry about answering what I just said. He then decided that he would get even for all the hurt that Jesus had caused him. And 6 days later, he made a deal to lead the authorities to Jesus. Y'all know that you're gonna push pause, go to the bathroom, get you something to eat, and come back, and you already texting somebody and tell them that they need to be watching this if it's a movie. Now, which author's arrangement authored and autographed the account? Let's just answer that. Which author? Which author? Because I guarantee you there's been more than one person writing your story. And I mean more than one other than you. So which author's arrangement of your story not only authored your story, but is having a book signing and signing autographs for the account of your story that they have no right to write. Yet it's been written. You ain't never gonna revise all that. They done paid to have enough books printed and sold to become a New York bestseller. So the revising ain't gonna help you. Now you just got to get revived to have strength to live through it and be focused on what you're supposed to be doing. But you do need to know who's out there lying on you, because there's a liar that lies on the liar. There's a betrayer that betrays the betrayer. Just know that your worst enemy has an enemy worse than that enemy. So as we wrap this up, arranging the betrayal. So this is another, so at the very bottom, discoverjesus.com is where you can see all of these last 3-4 slides that I've given you, whatever the specificity is around Judas. I've given you the link at the bottom. So arranging the betrayal, once Judas had decided that Jesus was not the expected deliverer, since he wasn't the Messiah, and since he allowed his cousin to be imprisoned and get killed, he met with a group of family and friends. When Judas told them that he wanted to withdraw from Jesus's group, okay, y'all was right and I was wrong, I'm leaving the church. They encouraged it, and they said that he would receive great honors if he really did leave. So his cousin suggested a meeting with Caiaphas, Judas's cousin, not John the Baptist, high priest of the Sanhedrin. Well, we know about them too. Go back if you don't. You're still in Passion Week. You can catch up just by going from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Today is only Wednesday, but oh my goodness, it's already Wednesday at the same time. But now look where he's going. He's going to the high priest. He's going to the Sanhedrin. Remember, we know about the Sanhedrin. We know that the Sadducees had more seats than the Pharisees. We got all of that stuff. So now Judas is saying, I left church. I ain't going back to church. This is how come people don't go to church, because this is all the lies and stuff that's being told. Okay, because the liar's lying. So now at the Last Supper, and we're going to talk about it, the Last Supper, tomorrow, because yes, I will answer the question. So what's the difference between the Last Supper and the Passover? Because they're both happening right now. And I'm going to do that timeline tomorrow. And that I do have done. So you should be able to get an earlier, hopefully, time. I don't even want to say it out loud, but I do already have that research done and documented for you. So we're going to talk about the Last Supper and the Passover at tomorrow's session. So you don't want to miss it, but you need to stick around as we wrapping up this, because I'm telling you, there's some juicy stuff out here about Judas, and you need to know if it's justice, if it's just us, and are we willing to transform positive social change by socially, religiously, and politically making it about just us long enough for us to ask God to forgive us, forgive ourselves, forgive anybody else that's trespassed against us, or anybody that never paid us back, but you knew that they were never going to. Lord, forgive me and them and everybody. So now maybe if more than one of us are doing that same thing, we can now ignite the greatest results of the revival, which would be if we're able to enact in the ministry of reconciliation. And it's impossible when people won't look in the mirror at themselves, when we don't do it, and we all don't do it at some point in our 86,400 seconds that we have in every day. If you don't believe that you disappoint yourself, you have not looked at yourself in the mirror long enough. Remember, go back to that slide, mirror, mirror on the wall. So Jesus arranged for the Last Supper. The 12 actually got there before Jesus did, and Judas was quick to take the preferred seat. Now y'all know what I've been talking about today, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're looking at this. Do you see this? He sat at the host's left. You know that was the devil when I was researching this. I didn't want to put this slide up here. After I said all that, being left-handed in the right-handed world that goes so far beyond just writing. But anyway, he got to that preferred seat, and where was the preferred seat for the kingdom's kid? It was to the left, even though he had already decided to betray Jesus. So when Jesus arrived and said that he was going to wash everybody's feet, Jesus took this as another sign of his unworthiness. Really? Now, after all this, you're going to wash our feet. So even though we hear about Peter's response to this historian is telling us this lens from, this is the Judas lens of this writer, not chapter verse, historical document. That's why I gave you it has a whole lot more information than I'm giving you. I've tried to condense it so that we can get our mind around it, not just our brain, but also our brain. So Jesus knew Judas intended to betray him, and when he told the others that there was a traitor among them, Judas dared to ask, "Is it I?" When Judas realized that Jesus knew it was him, then he jumped up and ran out to church. And he went to his cousin's house, and together they went to the captain of the temple guards. Now, remember, if we buy into the historic fact that Judas was an only child, then that would mean that his parents, who were wealthy, only had this one son, now moved to Galilee. That means they probably moved to be close to family because daddy got a better job, all that stuff. So again, bring it out of being this unreachable biblical time period and get yourself smack dab in the middle of the story because you're in the storyline. And now that we see how people write, you better get your pen because again, 100 years later, this could be you. And you and Glory say, but it's not true, but it's not true. So he went and got a family member to go with him to the captain of the temple guards. So then the arrest. Judas led the guards to the upper room, the site of the Last Supper, but Jesus and the apostles, they had already left. Judas then asked for more soldiers to go to Gethsemane. We haven't got there yet, but it's a very important place that we're going to get to, where he knew Jesus and the others were camped. When they found Jesus alone at an olive press, then he asked the captain of the guard, "Who do you seek?" When he answered, "Jesus of Nazareth," then Jesus replied, "I am he." Despite this attempt by Jesus to save Judas from his actual betrayal, Judas still kissed Jesus to identify him, just as he had promised them he would, because he had got paid. He had already got paid. Didn't matter the times that was waved. What happened is he was gave money. He was paid. When the apostles and others at the camp noticed the guards' torches and saw that Jesus was at the olive press, then they came to fight for him. But he commanded them to lay down their arms. Well, we do have scriptural account for that. We do know what happened. Jesus asked Peter, James, and John to watch, and he asked them to watch 3 times before he ever asked them to pray in Gethsemane. And yes, we know that Peter is the one pulled all of a sudden when he woke up, because when Peter was revived, then he picked up the sword because he already said, I ain't gonna deny you, but he did. So when Jesus was being led away, an order was given to arrest his supporters, but then they fled, escaping up a ravine. Judas thought he would be richly rewarded for betraying Jesus, but his motive was not the money. It was done for self-glorification and to avenge the hurt that he suffered. He expected to be praised and honored for his renunciation and betrayal of Jesus. But guess what happened? The betrayer got betrayed by the best betrayer of all. And it wasn't just Satan. It was the other folks in the society, right? So we see that now. When he went to the temple to receive his reward, the servant of Caiaphas took Judas aside, gave him 30 pieces of silver. So we already know that that's not consistent, even with the synoptic gospel writers' accounts. But again, here we are with the storyline. When did it happen? Well, it depends on when you're reading, where you're reading, and what perspective. And we already know you got the charts of all 4 gospel writers, and you can look at their perspectives. So gave him the money. Judas was then dismissed without the least praise, and the Sanhedrin court's obvious contempt for Judas, the traitor, stunned him into realizing, oh my goodness, what have I done? I committed the worst possible evil. I betrayed my friend. Even God incarnate, what have I done? Now, the next historic account says his death. In his grief and despair, Judas charged into the court, shouting his remorse. When the members of the court scoffed, Judas threw the 30 pieces on the temple floor, went out into the street. He wandered around outside. He didn't just wander, he wandered outside the city gates, and he climbed up a rocky peak. There he tied one end of his garment to an overhanging tree and the other end of his garment around his neck. He then made a suicidal leap, but the knot gave way, and he fell to his death on the rocks below. So this is a historic account, and this has closer interpretive possibilities of the hanging himself versus guts gushing out. And we'll continue to read those on their appropriate days. The legacy. The apostles were horrified and stunned by Judas's betrayal. Jesus only pitied the man, you know. Who said that? I pity the fool. He had warned Judas, and yes, I know it's Mr. T. He had warned Judas many times that he was drifting into spiritual danger. Well, it is important for us to be able to know if we allow warning before destruction. So what this historic account, this sentence in this really gives some weight and validation that is scripturally consistent, is God does provide warning before destruction. Even if we choose destruction, it is never because warning didn't precede it. But, you know, we can kick against the prick, and that gets us to Paul, which we're not there yet. So we see that Jesus had warned Judas many times that he was drifting into spiritual danger. And when the final crisis came, Judas chose pride and revenge over humility and fraternity, meaning the love of his brother. Forever after, oh my goodness, is this a Disney movie? Forever after that fateful decision, the name Judas has been equated with betrayal and therefore has become the meaning of the name. After Jesus's last post-resurrection appearance, which we'll get to, remember, we got 40 more days after the resurrection. Peter called a meeting of the apostles to choose a replacement for Judas, and the person that he named was Matthias. That's who was selected. That is important and will come into the future, but it gives the bookend for the juicy story of Judas. So now when you look at this chart, it makes more sense where I'm saying, depends on how you're counting. So here on Wednesday, there gets to be a lot of confusion, even though there are only these few verses about what happened on Wednesday. But now look, it's saying it was actually Wednesday. At midnight when they went to Gethsemane, it was actually Wednesday when it was Annas Caiaphas, when they broke for the Passover observance in the Sanhedrin. It was on Wednesday that Jesus was tried by the Jews 3 times from midnight to 6 a.m. before it turned Thursday. But for us, if we're looking at midnight, then it would have been Thursday when the garden and all of that happened. That's why I have to show you tomorrow how to count that time. And you see Azazel, away, crucifying him. And that is the name of the chief archangel of death when it is time to come to get us at the appointed time. So that's why that Azazel is important. Thy son, noon, Wednesday still. Darkness until 3. My God, I thirst. I commit my spirit. It is finished. Oh, wow. Okay, so this is now saying, wait a minute. How do we get Good Friday into Wednesday? That is absolutely why it is necessary for you to not only, let me tell you, it's so much good hooping preaching in here that be so excited I push my chair back and just stomp all around my room. No, God wants us to really be studying. This is a great opportunity for us to become holy hosts for the Holy Ghost, so we can now look at something that looks complicated and Sunday, when I showed you this, it was overwhelming. And now, hopefully, you're feeling a curiosity to dig further because now we see why this makes more sense than it did. And you know why? Because we were willing to take the time to watch the quill, not just the prequel and not just the sequel. So pick up your feather, eagle, because we got some oxen work to do. So now, wherever you are, whenever you are, whyever you are, and however you are, if God has been good to you during this revival session, and you have given your life to him, and you want to make Jesus your savior, you want to be a better citizen, you want to be part of those who are able to socially transform without espousing to a religion or a political position that prevents and interferes with the authenticity of the authorship that the Lord has authorized you to write. If that is you, get your elements so that we can commune together. I just believe, I believe it, y'all. I believe that there is a generation that's being raised to worship the Lord. I honestly believe it. If I'm not here to see it, I believe it. We have to keep reading, because if we only read that we're in a time of a great falling away, and we are. If we only read that we're living in a time when, if it were possible, even the very elect would renege on righteousness, even though we are living in a time when iniquity abounds and the love of many is waxed cold, even though we're living in a time while we're in the world but not of the world, that the cares of the world are choking out the word of us. Of us. We want to evangelize to the sinner, but we don't want to wake up and be revived ourselves. We become so far from being a Judas that we've just spent all of these seconds on looking at. We're so far from him until we find out how close we really are. Don't allow your story to end fictitiously, or even if it's nonfiction and it's real, it could be a lie. People could just swish swap around, insert a different name on this chapter, this verse. Just take your pen back, because our friend, he ain't mad at us. He's not. And I hear you. I can feel through these social media, digital delivery platforms. I can feel the burdens that are saying, no, Dr. Brenda, you don't know how bad it is for me. I don't. But you know what I do know? That however bad it is, your creator got you right the first time. You still a pedigree. You're still legitimate. You're still literate. You can still digest the life, the light, and the liberty that has been delivered to you on this 36th and 5th day of a 40-day virtual revival in Passion Week Day 4 on Wednesday, which we would call Day 3. That's what I do know. So I agree with God's word concerning you. And I agree with all of your holy thoughts, your hopes, your wishes, your dreams, your imagination. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, because that's where he created you to be. Hell wasn't made for you. So you may as well get the L out, because hell wasn't for you in the first place. I don't care what you have done, what you haven't done. I am here before you as a representative from the kingdom on earth for such a time as this, to say evangelically, apostolically, prophetically, pastorally, as a teacher, I am here sent to let you know that the provision doesn't need any revision. It only needs reviving. And the only way you're ever going to read the vision and make it plain, the chapters that tarry until they come, and then when they come, they don't tarry. The only way is going to be if you wake up so you can see. You got to be able to see to get the vision, to know that you don't need a revision. Just keep running with the vision. He got it right the first time. He got you right the first time. And even though we are being cornered by the crossroads, we're going to drop everybody else's cross. We're going to pick up our own. We're going to ask the Lord to forgive us. We're going to forgive ourselves. We're going to forgive our debtors and our trespassers. And we're going to get our daily bread, so that when we get to a tree with leaves with no figs, we still got faith to see the resurrection, even though we know we got to stop at Calvary along the way. What would Judas's song be? That's the question that I want to end with in this session. What now do you sing during Passion Week that reminds you of Judas? Jesus paid it all. Amazing grace. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? What is your song? I want you to share that. And I want you, for that 6-minute tithe, that's all. 6 minutes to look at your handsome, beautiful self and say, hey, love, I'm glad you're still here. I came to take you out on a date because I love you so much. And when you do that, your price becomes priceless. And that's what I've been sent to remind you of, so that you can wake up and so that we can commune together. Take, eat. This is my body that's broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. And right before we eat, just think about the scriptural account of Judas, where he said, is it me? And all Jesus did, because sometimes we're at a place and space where all we can do is say, I already told you, and then break, eat. I ain't got to tell you if you the betrayer, you already know. I ain't got to tell you if you the denier, you already know. I ain't got to tell you you're a doubter, you already know. But do you know that he was hung up for your hang-ups? Do you know that when he could have spoken, he didn't say a mumbling word? When he could have judged you, he said, I will not, because I'm going to do what my Father said. Drink. Why? Because as often as we eat this bread and drink this cup, we do show the Lord's death until he comes. So when we do it and we commune together, we're no longer isolated, and we're breaking up fallow ground, because before it's over, we will be able to institute the ministry of reconciliation. Pray for me. This was a virtuous one, but he has given us the virtue we need to be revived yet again. I love you so much. And it is always only until soon that I say, agape and Shalom. Show up Thursday. Well, it might already be Thursday, right? You got to learn how to count. And we're going to do that. Whatever time it is on the next day.